of his family tree. He donated twice, and he had one child, and that was my daughter.
Welcome to More Than an Inmate's Girlfriend. I'm your host, Jay. I hope you guys are doing great and having a fantastic week. I have been swamped with some new projects that are coming down the pipeline. You are going to hear from me soon on them. But this week we will be talking to Svetlana, and it is actually a two-part series. So we separated it from week one, her story, and then week two, his story, but speaking from her. So understand that it's a long story. That's why we separated it into two, but also she's speaking on his experiences in part two. And there's a lot that has gone on between them both in their personal lives before they knew each other and then after coming together. So very interesting story, very much worth the 2-episode series. And you're going to get to see what they are like and how their lives connected in more ways than one prior to them meeting. Very interesting situation. Before we get into the episode, just a quick reminder on the gift catalogs. Mother's Day is coming up, so if you do want to order a catalog, we do have a little bit left. Go on morethaninmatesgirlfriend.com, order that catalog. It's free. Enter in your loved one's information, and we will send them that free catalog. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to me, Jae at morethaninmatesgirlfriend.com, or you can reach me on social media at podcast_prisongf on Instagram or at morethaninmatesgf on TikTok. I am regrowing that Instagram slowly but surely. So please hit that follow button. Also hit that follow button on the podcast, that little plus button at the top. We love that. And it helps show us that you care. I hope you do. I don't have any news on anything else at the moment that I'm aware of or that I can remember. It's been a really busy week. So follow us on social media. Part 1 of Svetlana is off to a start right now. Take care, you guys. Bye. Welcome, Svetlana. So take us back. Let's start from the beginning. You weren't actually born in the US or Canada. You're from Ukraine. So what happened there?
Okay, so going all the way 40-some years back, I was born in Ukraine, and I was raised by my grandmother, who was a Holocaust survivor. So a very strict kind of Jewish upbringing, but I was doing a lot of after-school activities, weekend activities. I was in music school and music conservatories, putting 8 hours a day of that, traveling to perform in different cities, different countries. In 1986, Chernobyl, which was a city about 60 kilometers away from Kiev, nuclear reactors started leaking. And overnight, we wake up and the whole city is dark gray. The government never told anybody anything. It was still socialist government at that time. Okay. You're going to school and you're told this is normal. Wow. You're seeing it. We knew it's not normal. Something felt off. And it just continues from there. And you're waking up and most of your hair is on your pillow. Wow. So you don't know what's going on. And yeah, nobody tells you. And rumors are going around. And basically people start to realize, okay, there's something wrong. My mom had a box outside our apartment door, so when you come home from school, you take all your clothes off, you're butt naked, you're going right into the apartment because you don't want to bring anything in. The windows were all sealed shut, so no air comes in or out. I gained about 80 pounds within 3 months. I lost the next month. Like, it was crazy. My brother went blind. Things are happening. You don't know what it is, but you know it's something. Yeah. It was a weird time, like I said, especially when you're young and you don't know. Yeah. 1991, when Russia separates, so Soviet Union breaks down and Ukraine becomes independent. Mm-hmm. And with that, antisemitism is on the rise. There were signs in public places like libraries, museums, etc., no Jews allowed. So those were everywhere. Wow. After that, every place issued a law that you have to have the yellow Star of David on all your clothes. So when you're walking to school, your neighbors are throwing eggs, tomatoes, etc. at your head.
Wow.
That became normal.
Uh-huh.
Jews were kicked out of all the public places, and now they're not allowed to enter schools either. The reason I got to stay in school is I was performing a lot. I was bringing a lot of money into the country from what I now understand. So they want to keep that. So I did get to stay in school and do all that. And then Clinton made a speech about how Chernobyl is what it is and that people are dying from it. Mm-hmm. The worst was teenagers, because hormones are growing at that time and you're absorbing it. And a lot of young women are giving birth to kids with 3 heads, 1 arm. So they were saying that young girls especially need to get treatment for leukemia and different cancers because you can't survive. The radiation's in your system. It's a poisonous gas. But as a Jewish person, you don't get to go to the doctor's office because you're not allowed to. So that was something that Clinton did bring up. And so it was, I don't know details because I was young, but it was organized with Make-A-Wish Foundation. And 3 countries went in on that, Canada, U.S., and Australia, to get doctors to write a letter with medical records that if somebody has 6 months to live or less, they can be transported to one of those countries for medical treatment. Okay. They're not coming there with families. There were rules, like you don't know where you're going to go. You're going to get on the plane. They decide as you're going pretty much that day where the spots are, where availability is. You do get the medical treatment. However, you have to be able to financially support yourself because they won't support you. They can't support you. And you have to be enrolled in school. Okay. So I was 12 at that time. It was April. And I got the doctor to fill that out. And I got a 24-hour notice that I was leaving. I wasn't allowed to tell anybody because people can stop you. They can kill you, whatever else. The next morning, my grandma had a taxi, which took us to a train station. From Kiev, we went to Moscow on a train. And I remember we didn't say a word because I didn't know if I was coming back, ever going to see my family, because everything's unknown. All I remember my grandma said is, don't forget to write. And that's it. Wherever you go, just don't forget to write. Mm-hmm. So we got to Moscow. I got off the train. My grandma stayed on the train. And I remember the train turning around and she went back to Kiev. I got on the plane and it took me to New York. And I remember coming out of the plane. I didn't speak a single word of English. The only thing you're allowed to bring is your one backpack. I don't remember exactly how it went. I remember being lost. I remember walking into one of those tents. Somehow I did get registered for leukemia treatment. But April 29th, there was a car outside my apartment, and suddenly you're on a plane, basically. So that's how I got transported to Montreal, stopped there, then Toronto, stopped there for the day, and then Edmonton, Alberta. So I arrived in Edmonton, Canada. That is the journey.
Wow. Yeah. So then you move on with life and you get married and everything's going great. Walk us through that chapter of your life.
Yeah, life does go on. And I got my university degree here. I like going to places. I'm an extrovert. Mm-hmm. And I went to a rodeo with my coworker on a dare. She offered to take my weekend shift, so I couldn't pass that up. I went to a rodeo. I met a guy there. He was in law enforcement at that time, and I was working in child and family services. We worked with kids that were in abusive situations at home. So I was working in conjunction with law enforcement myself. I was very, very pro law enforcement and lock them up, throw away the key. At least some people I was seeing. Wow. But I did not want kids just because I was scared that whatever is in your system, I don't want to have a child that's born with 3 heads and then you're losing them and so on. But I also didn't want kids because I love kids. Right. Anyway, the person I met, we did get married. It was a big wedding. It was the big princess wedding, 400 people, and my family actually got to fly out from Ukraine, from Israel, all that. It was big. I was 19. We wanted kids, and we had several miscarriages. I had 7 miscarriages and a stillborn. Somehow my son was born.
Wow.
He was born perfectly healthy. That was awesome. And my husband and I fought a lot, not over kids, just we had our issues. He had temper issues, which we went to counseling for over and over. Mm-hmm. And at the end of it, we were at a counselor's office one time, and the counselor was actually awesome. And he turned to him and said, "Would you want to fix your temper issues?" And he said, "I don't want to. I just don't want to. I want this to be who I am." So at that point, I realized, you know what, it's not going to work because, you can only work at something when it's 2 people working. So we did agree that we're going to let it go. And by that time, we did have a daughter. So like I said, I couldn't get pregnant, but it was suggested to both of us that if we use donor sperm, it would help things, because sometimes 2 people might be less compatible than other 2 people. And my husband was actually really open-minded about things like that. So he was with me. He said, "Yeah, let's go for it." My daughter, Sarah, was born very preemie. She went home fine.
Awesome.
So that was that.
And at the time, you were also working as a psychologist. What was your role and working with children at that time?
Originally, I got a job at Child and Family Services. I got a job as a receptionist, which after I finished school, I progressed to actually working with police to remove children that are affected by parents that are sexually abusing them out of home.
Wow.
It used to be called the Zebra Unit.
Yes.
The children would be removed out of home. They would be given counseling. A lot of them went to foster homes if they're young. If they're teenagers, they went to group homes because most of them were behavioral kids. So they needed assessments, they needed counseling, they needed a diagnosis or anything like that. It's a lot of juveniles. That's mostly what we had. I haven't seen many children. Majority of the ones on my file were 13 to 18.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of them self-reported. Sometimes it's their siblings that did. But, yeah, that was originally where I started. And some of them did well later. Yeah. And some of them started to do things that they shouldn't have done. They broke the laws as well. And that was part of that. It was part of those assessments and trying to get them back on the right path. And sadly, some went to jail, some did not. Yeah. That was outside of my area, but it happened.
I think it's safe to say that your first chapters of your life were pretty crazy and hectic. There was a lot that went on and a lot that you've been through emotionally and psychologically. And then you exposed yourself on top of it to children who were going through it. You definitely have grown and learned a lot about life in those first chapters of your life. After your divorce, at some point you met Kenyon. What happened and how did you get introduced to him?
I got divorced and I did not want to meet anybody. I wanted to go through therapy. I think that everybody should have therapy. Every strength has a strength. That's the thing. So I did have somebody that I knew that worked at YWCA, and she got me a job at YWCA doing counseling, just therapy, counseling. Yeah. It was a lot of domestic violence groups, a lot of women. Sometimes it was men, but it was a desk job. I had my own office. It was great. My daughter there because she was still a baby, and it worked really well, but she did get me hooked up to one of the therapists there, which was covered under her benefits. So that was my goal. It was my goal to work on me. And then COVID hit. And we all know when COVID hit, the world kind of shut down and changed our lives forever. And she ran several women's groups. Okay. And it was a lot. So she asked me if I would be okay hosting one of them. And I thought that would be cool.
Yeah.
And I can do that from home because it's a Zoom meeting. So that's what we had. Those Zoom meetings were pretty open to public. people can turn off their camera, they can be anonymous. So it was just anything from coping with COVID to everyday issues. It was women. At that time, it was all women. Anne was one of the women, and she messaged me one time on Facebook and asked me if I want to talk to one of the guys who knows her boyfriend. And I said, no, I'm not interested. I didn't give her my life story, obviously, but I did say I'm doing my own thing. I've recently been divorced. I don't want to have a relationship. I got 2 kids. I got a job. I got me.
Yeah.
I'm good. Right now, I'm not jumping to any relationship. Anne does not listen to it. She gave my email address. And at that time, he was in Oregon. But Oregon, it has Telmate as their messaging system, and it looks just like email. So I get an email saying, okay, this person would like to chat with you. And it looked like one of those AOL kind of emails. I'm not a technology person. I didn't know prison communication systems. Canada doesn't have them.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, okay, somebody wants to talk to me. Let's find out who it is. He doesn't have names, just initials. He was interstate, so he didn't have an Oregon number because he's not from Oregon. He was from Connecticut. So all I knew is initials. And I click on the link. It's a free system. And I see an email from him. He just said, hi, I am, and it wasn't the real name. He did not give me a real name. So I'm so-and-so, and I just want to talk to you. Anne told me you're nice, and she was going to send me a picture and all that kind of stuff. And so I realized this is a guy, but who cares? I figured, what's the harm of talking to someone?
Yeah.
And we talked a few times. He did ask me for a picture, and I said, no, I don't really want to. So little did I know Anne sent my picture.
Okay.
She did send him a picture. Apparently he liked the picture or kept talking to me. I don't know. We exchanged a couple of weeks of messages, and I can speak for him as much as I can speak for myself. I didn't like him at all. It was very stifled, very boring.
Okay.
It wasn't really conversation. It was very much like a couple lines of the weather and this and that, no substance to it.
Okay.
To a point where I couldn't even see that as a friend. And I know now that he didn't like me either. He thought I sounded very stuck up because I just said basic stuff about me, so I didn't give any personal information really. He didn't like me. And he did have many pen pals, so I was not one he wanted to continue talking to. But anyway, at some point in time, after a few weeks, I stopped hearing from him. That was it. And I didn't miss it. I didn't even notice it. It was, whatever. And then Anne sends me a message saying, oh, just so you know, Keon's in the hole. And who's Keon? Then I realized, okay, that's got to be Keon. But I didn't know what the hole is because it was never referred to that way. I know the term solitary confinement. That's the only way I've ever referred to it. I didn't know what the hole is. All I knew is this guy, and I told her exactly that. If he's sitting there digging holes in some weird sandbox, I don't want it. This is weird. He can go see a therapist. Actually, use those words. He can see somebody, but not me. I'm not interested. That's it. Funny. And she was confused.
Yeah.
She was from Germany, so we had a language barrier to begin with. She was confused, but she left it alone, pretty much. And we stopped talking. And then all of a sudden, it was June 21st. 2021 that I got a letter from him. And in this letter, he actually wrote out everything. My real name is this. There was a picture attached. And Keon has only one arm. It was a birth defect. He attached a picture saying, if you don't, I have a birth defect, I have one arm. If you don't like it, well, then too bad for you. You don't have to accept me. I don't need anybody to accept me for who I am and all this kind of stuff. But he wrote out stuff about himself. And so I realized this is the guy, and he's in prison, and he mentioned he's in for felony murder. Great. I was saying, okay, no. This is going to be going away. We're done.
Yeah.
But then I was looking at the picture, and I got mad. I am that person. I got mad. I'm thinking, you don't get a right to tell me that I get to reject you, or I can't reject you.
Yeah.
I decide if I reject you. You don't reject me. You don't tell me, oh, well, if you don't like it, too bad. No, I'm going to tell you this is who I am. And if you don't like it, that's too bad. Plus, I don't care if you don't like it. Yeah. So we do credit our relationship to our stubbornness. So anyway, I did send a long letter back saying, well, this is who I am. And I did talk about myself a little bit more. I mentioned I'm from Ukraine and when I came to Canada and all that kind of stuff. And when I was in the U.S. as well and all that kind of stuff, I did go into that more. I didn't talk about the kids, but I talked about my life a little bit more. And I said, this is who I am. Now, if you don't like it, I don't care. But that's my last word on it. So he got that. And he was in the hole. In Oregon, you're in investigation for at least 30 days.
Right.
There's no tablets. There's no anything. So all there is letters. So he got that letter. And he told me, first of all, he loved the name because he has this thing for Russian women. He loves that they're bossy and all that kind of stuff. Classy, but bossy. Because he always feels like women get submissive. He doesn't like that. He likes when they can match you.
Right.
So he liked the attitude in there. But he thought, I don't fit into his life. I'm in Canada. That just doesn't work. But at the same time, he didn't want me to have the last word. So now he writes me a long letter. Not only does he tell me he's in for felony murder, but he gives me details of his entire crime, minute by minute of it, and names and everything else, like who the attorney was, who the DA was, all that kind of stuff. His family information. He originally from the East Coast, interstate Oregon. He told me why. And he says, yeah, so now if you don't like it, I don't really care. That's the letter he sent. So again, I get the letter. I read it, and he was very honest, but to me it sounded very cocky, which I don't know. It just
triggered
I thought,
you.
You know what? No. I think that confidence is great. You can be cocky if you can back it up, but I didn't know he could back it up. So I'm thinking, yeah, okay, let me see if I can challenge that one. So to me, it was a challenge to see which one of us will give up writing first. So I decided to write back and added some more details about me and ones that I figured will push a person away. Just because I wanted to say, there, now I know you're going to get scared off, and yeah, too bad. So he got that letter. Anyway, we continued doing that for a bit until he got out of investigations. And I remember I was doing laundry and my phone rang, and that was him. And I understand now, Anne gave him my number. He did call me in Canada, but
wow.
I remember it so clear. Like, I had a laundry basket in my daughter's room, and all of a sudden he just said, hey, it's Nyan. And I don't know, it just went as this normal conversation, like, how are you? How's the weather out there? Oh, it's sunny. Like, we just started to talk. And he worked in the call center, so he was able to use the phone a lot, and I worked from home, so I was able to use the phone a lot. And yeah, we just continued talking. It just somehow felt natural. But he did tell me he's in prison. He doesn't have technically a life sentence, but Connecticut gave him the amount of time that constitutes life sentence. He got 55 years.
Wow.
And basically, he's not looking for a relationship because what's the point? He's never coming home.
Yeah.
And so he told me right off the bat, if you're thinking you're going to have a relationship with me, I'm not interested, number one. And number two, I have a lot of pen pals. I think at that time he said 18.
Whoa.
I like to talk to people. He loves knowing about the world. So he loves to know people from everywhere in the world. He said, I like to talk to people. I want nothing else besides that. And I said, yeah, I'm cool with that. I don't want to get married again. And I definitely don't want a relationship right now. Maybe ever. Well, I mean, someday, but not with you. We were thinking great. We clicked as friends at that point, but we both did not want a relationship. So that was fine. Nobody's going to get their feelings hurt. I was okay with him having as many pen pals as he had. And so it continued. They have what's called BHS yards. So those that are handicapped, they get to go out first at 6 a.m. So every morning, 6 a.m., he would call me. We were in the same time zone. He would call me, and we would just talk for hours. I had him on speakerphone while I got ready, put my makeup on, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
He would tell me about different pen pals and ask my opinion. What do you think of that one? I started dating, and I was asking him opinions on guys, and should I wear this? And he would give me feedback, like, you don't feel good in this. You should try something else. We developed this friendship, and at that time, that's pretty much that. I can't say it was anything more than that.
Yeah. And then at what point did you realize that it was more?
We actually talked about it the other day. Don't know. And I asked him that. He says he doesn't know either. It just, one day he just mentioned, I'm only down to 5 pen pals. What do you think if I go down to 4? And I said, go down to 4, go down to 3, whatever. He goes, okay, let me rephrase it. If I don't have any pen pals, are you willing to stop dating? So I said, are you asking me to have a relationship with you? He goes, I'm not asking if you say no. So if you tell me yes, then yes, I want to know. But if you're going to tell me no, then no, I'm not asking. I said, well, you're not going to get an answer unless you ask me. He goes, then I'm not asking. Okay, that's fine. So next morning, first thing right in that phone call, he said, okay, I'm asking if I have no other pen pals because I've dropped all of them. Will you have a relationship with me? And I said, no.
What?
You're in prison. You're a lifer. You're in a different country. Can I name more obstacles than that? He said, tell me about your kids. And I said, oh, that's definitely a no.
Really?
You don't get to know about my kids, but you're a guy in prison. And he said, okay, well, what about if you knew about me and then make up your mind? I said, okay, how much do I get to know? So in a couple of weeks, I get a letter in the mail, and it was power of attorney. And he named all the people plus anybody else I can talk to. He gave me a list of anybody I can contact just to find out about him. So I contacted his attorney that represented him and his case. I contacted the district attorney, the prosecutor. I even contacted the judge. I contacted his school. I found out when he dropped out of school. I spoke to his kindergarten teacher. I spoke to his civil attorney because he's done a couple of lawsuits. I talked to his mother, who he had a very tumultuous relationship with at that point. And she knew who I was, which surprised me. But anyway, yeah, I talked to everyone, and it took about 3 months of talking to everybody. The details, and at that time, okay, I learned you can Google people. I read his case. I had boxes of it now sitting, and I read through all of it. And weird as it is, I liked him. There's something about the guy. I liked him. He was smart. He was a challenge. He was kind. And I don't know, he kind of fit me, if that makes sense. But I still thought this is insane. And at that time, my ex-husband and I were still like our divorce got finalized, but our assets were still being finalized. And I mentioned it. And he's heard me talk to him many times. He said, he sounds like the right guy for you. This guy cares about you. Talk about weird.
Yeah.
So that was, at that point, we set up our first video visit.
Yeah.
And yeah, I set up a video visit, and I figured he's probably not even going to show up. And he didn't show up.
What?
Yeah, they didn't tell him there's a video visit. That was a little bit on purpose.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he's a legal guy, so there was a lot of retaliation that was going on. So he didn't show up. So I figured, well, that tells me. But then I thought, no. If you're rejecting me, I get to reject you. So I set up a second video visit. He showed up to that one.
Okay.
And he apologized. And I've seen his picture before, but I'd never seen him in person. He was exactly that guy in person. And he was just easy to talk to. Like, you found your best friend. You can talk to about everything.
It feels like you also took a very long time to know him before you committed.
I did. Yeah. Me, I was always on the law enforcement side of things. So somebody in prison, that's first of all. Yeah. Somebody in for murder, that's another thing. And mostly it was friends are one thing. But if we're talking about relationships, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. He is locked up. I'm in a different country. We're in the middle of a pandemic. What does that really mean for us? I wanted to take my time before I said, yes, I would do that with anybody. Yeah. But this is a very weird set of circumstances. And I thought this sounds like a midlife crisis, but something about him. He was a person that I wanted to keep talking to, and I wanted to know more about. Because there's more to him. You can tell there's more to it. He never trusted anybody to talk to about the dark past stuff. But he would tell me things. And then he would stop and go, why did I just tell you that? And then he'd tell me all this stuff again. But I really never thought there's anywhere it might go until one video visit where my daughter walked in the door and she wasn't supposed to be home. But we're in the middle of a video visit and he had a tablet on the yard outside and it's sunny, it's not all summer. And we're just talking and she comes in, she goes, oh, who's that? So now I'm stuck and I'm saying, oh, this is Kian. She looks at the screen, she goes, oh, look, shirtless guys behind them. So that is the first thing she noticed. And then she looks at him, she goes, are you going to be my dad? And he goes, yeah, I'd like to be.
Whoa.
And I was thinking, okay, now you put me in that position. No, what do I say? I'll brush past it. But she went to do her own thing and said, that's my daughter.
Yeah.
I remember that. And that was the end of that visit. That's how he ended it. That's my daughter.
Oh my God.
So I think at that point we knew that relationship was going forward.
Right.
And
then what was the process of finding out who your daughter's father was?
so I got to visit him in person. Once COVID lifted, I got to visit him mostly because I wanted to know if he's real. Mm-hmm. I know he mentioned the word catfish, but I was thinking, how do I know it's not catfish? Mm-hmm. I mean, he showed me one person. Oh, that's still in the back of my head. And he actually said, why don't you come and meet me in person? I said, I'm not going all the way to Oregon just to meet you. Nobody actually comes over and meets someone. He knows. He poked the bear. I'm going to do that. So as soon as he said that, I said, well, now I'm going. So my kids and I actually went to Oregon that summer, and I met him in person. And through the whole 19-hour drive, I'm sitting there thinking in my head, what am I going to say first time I see him? I didn't know what to say. And I've researched all the visit stuff, and I picked the worst clothes I could ever get because I didn't want to get turned down because of what I was wearing. So I didn't dress up. I didn't do any of that. But I walked through. He was at the very, very end. He was sitting there. They always bring the prisoners first, and they uncuff them before you get to come in. So that was nice. They didn't always do that, but they did that for him. And when I sat down, the first thing I said is, there, I showed up. And he goes, I knew you would. Just that. It was, at that time, we started really talking like, okay, now I'm in Oregon. Okay, this is a relationship. And then he started talking like a relationship with somebody in prison involves a lot of BS. There's a lot of advocacy that's involved because sometimes things happen and just things like that. And then he was telling me that his ex-girlfriend, I'm not going to name her, but his ex-girlfriend was doing DNA testing for him. She registered him with one of those agencies. He had his blood work done, all that stuff, because he wanted to find out who his father was. And I thought it was kind of cool.
Yeah.
And I talked about his past all the time. It wasn't until my next visit, about 3 months after, that the paperwork of his family tree narrowed his father down to 2 options, but he donated twice, and he had 1 child, and that was my daughter. Both of us just sat in silence until the end of the visit. We literally didn't speak, and at the end I walked out, still didn't speak, got to the hotel room, then he called me and goes, so that is my daughter. I said, yeah, I guess it is. He goes, what are we going to do about that? I said, nothing. He goes, what about our relationship? I said, our relationship doesn't change. Just, but now, should we get married? I said, hell no. We're not getting married. You realize you're in prison. Again, I'm citing the same factors. You got a license. And he said, okay, but now can I get a chance to know about the kids, both of them? I said, yeah, I guess you can now. Yeah. Not because of that, but we're in a relationship. I guess you can talk to the kids, and we do write a lot. That was our thing. And communication obviously was our thing. We talked for several hours a day. And he started writing not just to me, but to both of my kids. He included a letter to each one of them. And so that became something that he was building. And again, remembering that both of us very firmly said we don't want a relationship or marriage. I asked him that the other day. When did you decide you want to marry me? Because I couldn't think of a day. And he said, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't think there was a day. One time when they transferred them from one facility to another, it was a very big retaliation issue because he was willing to testify about a transgender person being assaulted by guards, and it took away all his communication, not even mail. And at that time, he said he realized how much he missed me. And he realized that, yeah, that's my person. He said, I think that was the time because that's the only person I was thinking about. So that's the best we can narrow it down to. And that was probably 2022, beginning of 23 now. I jumped through that. But yeah.
And did you tell your daughter?
Yes, right away. Because I believe in full honesty, age appropriate, of course,
right.
with my kids. I thought that if I ever start dating, they need to know. I'm not going to just parade some guy through my life kind of thing. Mm-hmm. They're involved in it, so they need to know this person was serious. So they did meet him, obviously, during the in-person visits. We had video visits, all that kind of stuff. We would set them up during supper time so we can eat supper together. He would have the video visits, idea from a tablet, and we'd be eating at the same time. But I did make sure I told her, this is how your birth happened and why I went that route. And you have a dad, you have a papa. That's what he wanted to be called. So we were going to make that work. And my ex-husband knew that as well. And he thought it was cool. She gets two dads, two people that love you. Our marriage wasn't great, but our divorce was amazing.
Yeah.
In regards to that, we agreed that we have kids. We're not going to have drama.
Yeah.
So for them, we're going to be on each other's side. And he was that person that kept telling me, this is your guy. This is the right person for you. Because I've heard you argue and we debate all the time. That is your person. So, wow. Yeah. So we told her right away, she's cool with us. She doesn't think it's anything interesting or weird or, I don't know, to this day, she thinks it's normal.
Wow. And when the idea of marriage came up and you decided to get married, were you nervous about it?
I didn't want to get married. To me, getting married in prison didn't make sense. But in beginning of 2024, he started to talk about marriage, and not in a romantic way. It was kind of like pushy. Let's get married. Let's get married. Let's get married. And I was thinking, what's the rush? It's a piece of paper. And he said, they can send me back home anytime. And if I'm going back home, I'll be in Walker facility where you have to be a parent, a child, a sibling, or a spouse to have visits. I'm not going to be able to see you then. So that was something he was worried about.
Okay.
I don't see a rush. Little did I know, it was a few weeks after that I thought he was going to medical. He does have a lot of medical issues.
Yeah.
I thought he was going to medical over his gallbladder, and I didn't hear from him for 2 weeks. Not normal considering how much we talk daily. And I called the facility, and they said, oh, yeah, he's in medical. He's back in his cell by tonight. The next day, they were telling me, oh, yeah, he's not back, but he is in another cell, and he's talking to some woman. That was that. And then the next day after that, oh, yeah, he's back, but we moved himself. He's talking to several women.
Wow.
They were playing a lot of games.
Yeah.
So it was about 2 weeks when he called me saying, guess what? I'm in Oklahoma in federal holding. So they ditched them to Oklahoma, and they were trying to send him back to Connecticut. Connecticut wasn't willing to accept him. So it ended up with me trying to call the marshals and find out, like, okay, he's got to go somewhere. He can't just sit there unknown.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, we decided that, yeah, okay, we need to get married.
Yeah.
Now.
I agree.
So we got married through a video visit. My ex-husband went online, got ordained. So it was that kind of wedding. It was a video visit. My kids were witnesses.
Aww.
I was in my living room. I didn't dress up. It was full circle.
Yeah. He
said his vows, but he also wrote them out and mailed them to me. Because I think at the end, I said something. It's not real unless I get it in writing. So he actually sent them to me in writing.
Mm-hmm.
But it was not the grand romance of the year. Yeah. But we got married. It was more practical than anything. I knew by that time this is my person.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I knew I was going to marry him.
Yeah.
Was this the way I pictured it? No. Do I have regrets about it? Yes, only because I wish I did different kind of paperwork and something like that, because I didn't. Right. State to state varies, and yeah. I didn't. But I didn't care about the big wedding.
For your immigration.
Big wedding. Yes.
Yeah.
And we knew that. I mean, we've discussed it for a long time. Like, how do we do our future? Obviously, he's not coming anywhere soon. Like, he's inside for probably the rest of his life. And he always said, I'd move. if I could, but Canada doesn't accept anybody with a felony.
Yeah.
So logically, it made sense that I moved. And I agreed to moving to Oregon. And we had it all ready for me to move to Oregon, but suddenly he was shipped off. So now I'm thinking, okay, I'm moving to Connecticut.
Yeah.
Which,
very different.
yeah. So I have no regrets about marrying him, but I didn't know about Connecticut. I've never been to Connecticut. But as we were talking, he said, maybe that's a blessing in disguise because my mom's there, my sisters are there, all my family's in Connecticut, so you're not alone.
Yeah, yeah.
He was right in that regard. I don't like Connecticut DOC. I actually think Oregon was nicer.
Oh,
but
wow. Interesting.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the choice we had. September 2024, he arrived in Connecticut, and it was about 8 months before I was able to get a video visit with him because they played those games that,
Jeez.
well, you didn't get married here. The certificate is not from here.
Wow.
Therefore, it's not valid. And these are games they still play once in a while.
Yeah. When I was getting married, they had banned our marriage as well. And I was looking into the marriage via video, like through Kansas. And then I read that you can't use that marriage as it's not recognized by immigration. So I was like, oh, I don't want to risk that and have to go through all that. So we ended up having a similar thing to you where we had our own little personal exchange of vows on the day that we thought we were going to get married. And then we ended up, when they finally granted us the wedding, we had the 20-minute ceremony and then I had to leave. But yeah, I know it's complicated for sure. And my husband's a lifer too. So I don't know when or if he'll ever be free, but he definitely cannot come here. He would not be approved. Although I wish he would. It would not happen. Interesting.
No, and it was complicated because originally my move was to U.S., but I wasn't a U.S. citizen. So it was really messed up to that. And we have more than one country here that's in play. So immigration is difficult. Our relationship has never been difficult.
Yeah.
We enjoy the challenge to each other. We're both stubborn and we'll double down. And being married to him is the easiest thing I've ever done. Being in a relationship with him is the easiest thing I've ever done. But the prison and the government regulations is what makes it difficult because you can go from county to county and get different information. Yeah. And that happened to us. I've had to register that certificate that they accept in one county, but not in another one.
That's crazy. I do want to talk about your husband's past and go down his incarceration because I know that you're able to speak for him, which I'm really grateful for because he's been through it. Like, not only has your marriage had challenges from external forces, but his life in general, he's also gone through a lot of challenges. So it's really fascinating actually to hear your story and then hear his story and how you were able to come together and be there for each other despite all the challenges and stuff that you've been through in your lives separately. Can you talk to me a little bit about your husband's childhood and things that are important you think to share about his journey?